Hank is a lonely, suicidal man marooned on an island. He encounters Manny, a corpse washed ashore with a town of gaseous proportions. Hank manages to escape his isolated purgatory by the use of Manny's farts, only to be stranded in even more wilderness. As Hank discovers more of Manny's special powers, Manny's corpse reanimates and gains the capacity to speak.
Okay, buddy.
Winner of the Best Directing Award at the 2016 Sundance Film Festival, Swiss Army Man, starring Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe, is an indie feature worth discussing. Here's why. Let's start by examining the narrative structure of this film and whether Swiss Army Man qualifies as a contemporary example of classic Hollywood cinema. CHC films typically have four primary components. First, they require a protagonist to drive the events of the film. Hank is Swiss Army Man's main protagonist. The film is all about his journey of returning to society. He uses Manny's multi-purpose cadaver abilities to help him survive and conquer the wilderness. Hank is even the driving force of the film's score, as the a cappella music found in Swiss Army Man is imagined inside his head. Secondly, all CHC films contain a moral message. Swiss Army Man has many themes, from man versus nature, the law of diminishing returns, to the human need for distraction. All of these main themes circle back to the moral message of acceptance. Hank and Manny challenge society's inherent need to judge. The reason farts are treated as symbolic iconography within the film is to emphasize that message. Denotatively, the film treats farts as something that shouldn't be held in just because it is deemed as socially unacceptable. The connotative meaning is that you should let your ambitions and emotions come out and be free, even if they run contrary to public perception. Only then can you truly be yourself. Third is the component of couple formation. Sarah is Hank's love interest throughout the film. A stranger who Hank once saw on a bus, Sarah becomes the duo's motivation to reach civilization. As much as Hank believes Sarah is the one, he ultimately does not end up with her. In fact, the real couple formed is that of Hank and Manny. As Hank's bond with Manny strengthens, Hank uncovers more about himself. More on that later. The last main component is a resolution. This is where Swiss Army Man strays from the CHC template. The film's directors, Daniel Kwan and Daniel Schienert, aka the Daniels, wanted to constantly subvert expectations. Swiss Army Man is left with an open ending, letting the viewer interpret whether the whole film is supposed to be an absurdist fairy tale or a fever dream inside a damaged mind. Lacking little denouement in terms of what will happen to the characters after the credits roll, I will say that the film does not contain a proper resolution. Because of this omission, Swiss Army Man is not an example of classical Hollywood cinema. Swiss Army Man is an amalgam of different genres. One is that it's a psychological drama where Hank battles his own self-brokenness. One way that this genre departs from common texts is that as more characters enter the climax of the film, they too have the capacity to witness Manny's abilities. Perhaps Hank isn't as crazy as he seems.
Or I'm just hallucinating from starvation.
Rom-coms often involve an unlikely pairing. Manny and Hank become that unlikely pairing. This is just another way that the Daniels break viewers' expectations. Who would ever thought that a suicidal man and a dead body could find romance? This stretches the familiar conventions of the genre, making the most unrealistic of coupling able to share the most realistic of emotional attachment. The genre that I think roots this film is that of buddy comedy, which involves two characters, often male, with contrasting personalities who get put together. Manny within the film is treated as a blank slate, and it's up to Hank to teach him about the quirks and pleasures of being human.
What is life?
This dynamic creates believable situations for the characters to openly express their feelings. All these bits and pieces of genre framework work together to put Swiss Army Man in a category of its own. It's a film of transmogrifying genres. This lends to the Daniels' advantage, as film viewing pleasure stems from difference. While watching, you really won't know what to expect next. The editing techniques of Swiss Army Man are used to emphasize the psychological components of the film. Much of the story is vignetted, as it moves at the pace of Hank's fractured mind. The editing speeds up when dialogue is spoken quickly,
Thought,
and slows down upon the character's contemplation.
to me when I couldn't sleep, so I wouldn't overthink things, but I don't remember the words.
The film relies on heavy use of montage to condense time and to imply meaning. Montage is taken to the extreme, and I'm sure that Eisenstein himself would applaud the film for its intercutting shots which critique societal and political norms. Heck, there's even a diegetic musical number about the technique. I also would like to bring to attention the nearly 3-minute long tracking shot that occurs near the very end of the movie. This is the only part of the film that utilizes such an extended take. We follow Hank as he comprehends the aftermath of his rescue. Time is moving at a more natural pace, as it illustrates reality seeping back into Hank's world. By the climax of the movie, the viewer is left unsure as to how much time Hank and Manny really spent inside the forest. I would like to apply the cinema as frame concept to a specific sequence where Hank is teaching Manny about life. It takes place in a cave whose border forms a theater-like arch across the screen. Hank and Manny are putting on a play for the viewer, utilizing garbage to make an elaborate set. This sequence is drawing attention to the status quo, to Hank's everyday perception of what life should look like, framing the viewer to perceive things the way Hank sees it. Another concept that I would like to draw upon is that of Freudian psychoanalysis. Manny resembles the id portion of Freud's psychic apparatus. He's motivated by strictly primal instincts.
I want to have sex.
And is depicted as overly emotional.
Is this crying?
Hank, on the other hand, resembles the superego. He is constantly instructing and enforcing Manny on how he should behave as a member of society.
You can't just say everything that comes into your head. That's bad talking.
The id and superego are often in conflict with one another. The id is part of the unconscious, which is something the superego has to control the impulses of. These traits are very important to Hank and Manny as they are one and the same, which leads me to my last but not least theory. Manny is actually a self-reflexive mirroring of Hank. This is the cinema as mirror concept. Hank is alive, but dead inside, while Manny is dead on the outside, but alive on the inside. Manny is a part of Hank's soul, a part of his own unconscious. This is why Manny starts to remember memories that are actually Hank's own memories.
Remember Jurassic Park?
This concept is also hinted at the end of the film. The news reporter accidentally calls Hank by the wrong name.
Manny, there you are.
Since Manny is a doubling of Hank, the skills that Hank used to survive came from inside himself all along. In conclusion, Swiss Army Man's reversal of expectations, genre bending, use of temporal and spatial montage, and synergy between Hank and Manny's character allow for an incredibly deep and pleasing viewing experience. My analysis has taught me not to judge a movie by its premise, and I hope it's enough to prove that Swiss Army Man is not just some farting corpse movie.
Oh, that's not funny.